question is, what story is life-giving? What story puts me in a right relationship with other humans and the natural world? What story matters so much that I am willing to risk everything for it? What story am I willing to sacrifice my life for? Well, hello, dear friends, and welcome to the Craftsman's Workshop. This is where, inside the Patreon community, I open the uh, backstage curtains a little bit and let you into the process of how things happen here over at Nicholas Kotar's, as I heard some of you call it, the Kotarverse. And it's starting to catch on in my brain. Sounds a little silly, maybe, but I like it. um, Many of you will have woken up this morning to the shocking, perhaps, notification from Patreon directly that your tiers were changed inside Patreon. That's something I want to talk about today and explain in a little bit more detail the rationale for what's going on inside Patreon. And I'll get to that in a second. But first, I wanted to put the whole process into somewhat of a better context so that those of you who are watching both live and in the recording afterwards can get a sense of what's going on. And so you don't feel ultimately like this is simply a cash grab by a power hungry and greedy author. At the beginning of this calendar year, many of you were very gracious in accepting from me a pledge that I would do less in the calendar year 2024, both on Patreon and in my author business in general. I wrote that message to you all under the influence and inspiration of a book written by a guy that I follow named Newport. I recommend him to pretty much anybody I meet. He's a computer science professor in Georgetown, but he is somebody who speaks and thinks at the intersection of culture and technology, and somebody who has a very, very good handle on the deep underlying mechanisms by which we who work in the knowledge industry, storytellers, um, writers, historians, anybody who uses a laptop to make their living, or who teaches or otherwise uses their intellectual powers to make a living, how our way of work is very badly compatible to the post industrial American paradigm of what work is, and how very often our own expectations for ourselves as well as others' expectations for us involve a kind of factory assembly line mindset where the more widgets you crank out, the more it means that you are working. And the strange thing, as Cal Newport has demonstrated quite convincingly, is that that sort of approach to a creative endeavor, especially if that creative endeavor is a professional endeavor, in other words, if you're making money off of it, can actually have the opposite effect of stifling the creativity to such a degree that nothing comes out. It's a very strange thing, human creativity. It's a very wonderful and beautiful thing. It's a very subtle and mystical thing. And it does not work if you push it too hard. So at the beginning of this year, I was in Belarus with my family. We were going through some difficult family situations, including an illness, a serious illness of my youngest child. And in light of all that, and in light of the need to reconfigure, re-envision, and reestablish the way I do work in general, especially since I work primarily from home, a place where there are 4 children who are homeschooled, and there is very little opportunity or space for the kind of long, concentrated attention that's required for this kind of work. That being said, I asked you all to be generous with me in allowing me to explore the ideas that Cal Newport presented in his new book called Slow Productivity. And the ideas of slow productivity are about less output, more focus on quality, and several other ideas that I went over in previous videos and previous posts on this Patreon community and in other places. And I will not belabor the point too much. But the central idea was that I asked, and you graciously gave me the chance to explore what it might mean for me output less and to input more, to take the year to really think and work through what is necessary and important for my creative business and for my creativity as just a human being who writes in the reality of being a father of 4 children who are homeschooled in a place where we, my wife and I, have to create our own home and community culture essentially from scratch with a small group of other families who live in a very rural place that doesn't have a lot of amenities, a lot of good infrastructure, and certainly not good medical care. And all of the pitfalls and challenges that come about with the absolutely willing and uh, not forced decision to go and live in a place like this. And as you've seen, my output during this year has been a lot less than in previous years. But again, so many of you have been very kind and have suggested to me that this is not a problem. What you want to see, what you want to do is support me. What you want to see from me is deeper and better content. So that has been the theme for the year, and I think after this period of almost a calendar year, I'm finally coming to a place because of extended long periods of thinking and writing and just living in new circumstances. I think I've come to a place where it's truly a new phase in my author and publisher business, and Patreon is a big and important part of all that. Slow productivity remains a very key component to how I will create in the future, and add to that another idea that Cal Newport is exploring in a future book of his, the cultivation of a deep life and what it means to live deeply. This to me means how do I, as a creative person, live in such a way that I am constantly engaging with the natural world around me, with the spiritual world of my faith, and with the real world of the people that I encounter both virtually and in person through my various speaking engagements and in-person teaching opportunities, such as St. Basil's Writers Workshop and other places where I go speak or sing or conduct or in other ways interact with people creatively. This is where this is fodder for creativity for me. But so often these things have been the thing that I have tried to get through more quickly because it isn't as immediately obvious to me how those things can be financially rewarding as sitting in front of a computer and clicking on things and waiting for analytics to come back in the form of either sales or clicks or other vanity metrics. And because of the way that the internet is structured and because of the way that our and my attention is fractured and not focused by the reality of the internet and the reality of the magic black supercomputer in my pocket, this means that when I started from a place of great focus, when I started to write my books in 2014 or so, that focus has become dissipated over the very many things that author publisher types have to do, especially if they publish their own books. And not this is not an excuse, it's simply a reflection of reality. And with this time that I've spent over this past year thinking and deeply and writing and engaging and talking to others and having very important conversations with people that are farther along in the author journey than I am, it's become clear to me once again where the nexus, the reason for what I do is. And it won't be surprising to you when I read to you what I think the kind of mission of what I do here in the Patreon community specifically is. This was a quote that I read in a recent publication called Pilgrims in the Machine by a friend of our Patreon, Petzo Gaskowski, who has been on our live channel here inside Patreon in a wonderful conversation for Wood Between Worlds Press. And in a recent post of his, he had this wonderful quote that I want to share with you and that I want to suggest is a kind of focal point for me in how I'm going to work on this Patreon in the future and how I would invite you to come and join in this quest together with me. Here's what he has to say. The question is, what story is life-giving? What story puts me in a right relationship with other humans and the natural world? What story matters so much that I am willing to risk everything for it? What story am I willing to sacrifice my life for? I wouldn't have expressed it in such stark language before, but so much of my exploration of fantasy media and sci-fi media, both in written and visual form, has been about finding that kernel of beauty, truth, goodness in media that is written by the most diverse people you can imagine, films and TV shows that are created by the most diverse people you can imagine, and yet to find the joy, the consolation, as Tolkien would have it, the consolation of fantasy in it, because that's what I need from my reading. I don't want a simple uh, escapist experience, although escapism is much desired in a world such as we live in right now. But escapism must lead to consolation, and consolation must lead to transformation of the inner person. And I think that's very important for myself. And I want to share that journey with you all so that you perhaps might find a few things as I read, as I encounter, as I go deep into the classics and modern fantasy and sci-fi media, especially because those are the things um, that really speak to me, that you can get an inkling and a sense of the importance of why storytelling is so key for us as we navigate a world that is getting weirder, weirder and more difficult to understand, where even the idea of truth becomes so relative when deep fakes can be extremely realistic, when you have now technologies that can represent uh, the content of a written book or post or blog in the form of a podcast of two fake people talking to each other. I'm talking about Notebook LM, which is a new technology that Google recently came out with, which creates AI generated podcasts based on information you feed into it. Remarkably lifelike. This is the world we live in. How do we navigate the strangeness, the uncanny valley of it all? Well, it's by going deeper into those stories that are the most beautiful, the most human, the most true, the most good. And that's really what animates my own reading. And it's what I hope you will get from being here in this Patreon community now and in the future. This means that there will be a new focus inside my Patreon community. It means a cutting off of certain things so that the things that remain may be, in the spirit of slow productivity, really honed and perfected so that quality becomes the thing that you see and not quantity, something that I'm very bad at. I'm excellent at churning things out if I need to, but to really go deep, to really think, to really engage, to really allow myself to be inside an idea, a theme, a story for a long time, that takes work. Just as prayer takes work, just as anything important in our life takes work. So I recently released and sent out a survey to my existing Patreon supporters, wanting to hear from you all what it was that you liked the most. Overall, the picture that I received was somewhat frustrating because it really reflected my lack of consistency. The answers you gave reflected my own lack of consistency in presenting a clear vision. And so your desires for the channel were as variegated as my interests were within the channel, which I suppose I should have somewhat expected. And yet there were some trends that I could see. And in particular, those trends that really stood out to me is that you all appreciate live streams and one-on-one in-person interactions on Zoom, or actually in person, which is not something we've been able to do yet for this particular Patreon community, but it is something that I hope to do in the future. So with that being the case, I want to share an interesting story that happened to me recently. Probably the most popular bit of content that I've done over the past few years, specifically for my Patreon community, was a series of conversations that Richard Rowland and I had about the Rings of Power season one. Many of you will remember this, and you will remember how much fun we had eviscerating season one for its many lapses in storytelling ability and its very many plot holes, bad acting choices, and other things. Now, uh, it's perhaps not surprising that this in 2022 was the last thing that I actually published as a YouTube video and as a episode in my then podcast Fantasy for Our Time, which was supposed to be the place to gather my thinking and my exploration of these genres as places of joy and consolation. Perhaps it's not surprising that I stopped at a point where joy and consolation were no longer the thing I was talking about, and it was more an evisceration. Joyful though it was in the moment, eviscerating a bit of content like Rings of Power season 1 that was as bad as it was, I think. And yet, it definitely dampened my creativity for a while, and I didn't want to return to that format for a long time. It also didn't help that I lost my audio video guy for a while, and I tried to learn how to actually produce YouTube videos and podcast episodes. And not surprisingly, the learning curve on something like that for someone who is already effectively a full-time creative was impossible. So I was left orphaned, and I wasn't ready to look for somebody else to become my audio video guy. I actually tried with a few people, nothing really stuck, and my own inspiration had kind of dried up. The really funny thing, though, is that I happened to look on the channel page for the Fantasy for Our Time podcast inside Spotify recently. And keep in mind, there hasn't been a new episode posted for 2 calendar years. And this, in podcast land, is a recipe for death. If you don't post consistently for any period of time, people aren't going to pay any attention. Podcasting is very much a medium of the moment. It's happening right now. Pay attention. I'm here. Hello. Right. There was not a single new podcast episode that I put since 2022. And yet, from that moment in 2022 to me casually checking that page, almost 100 new ratings showed up, and they were all positive, or almost all positive. Uh, and I couldn't understand what was going on. And then I saw that Spotify's internal recommendation engines had become more sophisticated over the past year or two, as they have been very energetically buying up different purveyors of audio technology. And so their internal recommendation engine, the thing that says, if you like this, you should listen to that, became very good. And it connected me with the Symbolic World, with Amon Sul, and with the Symbolic World podcasts. Sorry, and with the Lord of Spirits podcasts. Now, those shows are consistent, regular, and have very high numbers of audience, right? So the fact that my show was connected to those by way of the recommendations, and the fact that people were actually coming from one to the other without me doing any work, meant that the podcast wasn't dying. And in fact, it was coming back to life without me doing a darn thing. And that really interested me, because podcasting is hard. It's hard to keep going precisely because it's the kind of technology that takes a while to take root. You have to keep doing it again and again and again. And I got to a point where I was kind of burnt out, and I didn't really see any reason to continue. And in my absence, the thing itself kept going. So I'm bringing it back. I'm bringing back Fantasy for a Time as a podcast, and it's going to be happening as it was before, when I was still consistent, before these past 2 years of personal and professional difficulty, which I've talked about at length before, and I won't repeat here. Live streams based on my reading of fantasy media, but also of other things that intersect or sometimes don't intersect. I try to read widely, and I try to connect ideas from different interests and different worldviews and different uh, I don't know what the word is. Um, uh, it's right on the tip of my tongue. I hate when this happens. Different disciplines, that's the word. And see how they can come together in interesting and new ways. That's the kind of thing you all have consistently told me that you want more of. So we're doing that. We're going to go back to regular live streams here inside Patreon that are going to be exclusive to my Patreon community. There will be opportunity for you to engage with me, Q&As. These will be live streams, which means there will be a live chat feature that you can use. You can engage with me. Later on, those will be edited. They will be there will be a nice header and footer added, and they will be released on my YouTube channel as part of an ongoing and regular series of offerings on my author YouTube channel. They will also then be repurposed into audio files and released in Spotify and other podcast catchers as the rejiggered version of Fantasy for Our Time podcast. So I'm very excited about it, actually. And it's going to, because there's a lot of things I need to read. I have not been reading much. And now that this is clearly needs to be a focus of the podcast, of the Patreon community. And since you're all so generous and really do help me maintain a good living wage, it would be criminal not to. So it's exciting for me, and I hope it's exciting for you. I will also continue these kinds of craftsman workshop live streams every once in a while, where I again kind of open up the backstage curtain and let you in on the process of what it means to be um, a multi-passionate creative making money off of his work. You have found those to be interesting over the past year or two, and I will certainly continue those. Author interviews will continue sporadically. These will not be a central part of this Patreon. They are more opportunities for me to get to know authors that I personally want to know because I like the reading. And for you, the added bonus is that you get to have access to the recording studio, and you will have um, an opportunity to ask one-on-one questions of these authors in ways that nobody else will. Later on, that Q&A section will get chopped off, and these interviews will also be featured on my YouTube channel as part of my regular offerings. But they are going to be less regular and more sporadic because they very much depend on where my interest is going and who actually answers my emails when I reach out to them. Some of these authors are quite famous, and sometimes they're not interested in talking to piddling little mortals like yours truly. Um, so, how is this all going to be unified? At the beginning of each month, I'm going to suggest a theme for the community that I'm going to share inside the Discord chat. Now, those of you who do not know that we have a community Discord, it's annoying that Patreon doesn't integrate with Discord in such a way that you can have forums on Patreon itself. It does have a chat feature. It's not good. And we've been using the Discord for a while. So I'm loath to leave it. But I'm going to focus the conversations inside the Discord by offering topics of conversation for you all. This is going to be a monthly theme. And part of that monthly theme will be a list of things that I'm planning on reading and watching and listening to during the course of the month. You are very welcome to join me in this quest of reading, listening, and watching these things and considering how they might relate to the theme of the month. At the end of the month, I will have an in person Zoom for some tiers inside the Patreon where we will talk about the theme and the things that I read and watched. And you will tell me what you managed to do and what not to do and ask me questions. And we could talk about whatever you like. Uh, the theme there is mainly to help focus the conversation. It's not there as a kind of prescription from me. This is just an opportunity for you all to chat. And hopefully, you will, as sometimes happens inside the Discord community, will be able to have conversations amongst each other. And I will come in every once in a while and chime in. But really, I'm hoping that you all will take the opportunity to use that space as your own home to talk about the things that you love. I'm not going to be moderating it myself. I'm just going to be coming in saying hello every once in a while. It's your space, and I'm going to try to make it as welcoming and comfortable a place as possible in 2025. And of course, this leads naturally to the subject of this video, which is what on earth is going on with my Patreon tiers? Why suddenly am I paying a different amount of money than I was yesterday? I didn't sign up for this. You are a terrible human being, Nicholas Kotar. What on earth? All right. This is partially logistical. Uh, Setting up tiers inside Patreon is a long and very laborious process. It's one that I've taken hours to do to set it up the way it has been set up for the past few years. Now, I had a few coaching calls with authors, author publishers in the independent sphere that are far ahead of me. These are multi six-figure earning author publishers who have a lot of experience setting up communities specifically for readers and for writers as distinct operations. And they looked at my Patreon and they said, what you are offering is great, but you are insane for offering the amount of things that you do at the price points that you are offering. And I said, really? Because I was I had set the price points for the offerings of the Patreon when I opened the Patreon in 2018 or so. That was a very different world. That was before COVID. That was before a lot of things happened. And that was certainly before a very marked change in the relative valuation of online subscription models, because that, in effect, is what Patreon is. Now, Patreon used to be something that was a lot less technical. It used to be simply a place where people could go and offer patronage money as much as they were able to in order to help support a a creative as much as that was humanly possible. That is no longer what Patreon is. It itself phased itself out of that model. It's trying to become, not very successfully, I have to say, but it's trying to become a do it yourself, full service subscription platform for creatives to be able to make enough money to be professionally successful. That is not patronage. That is something else. So the name Patreon is no longer really valid. Now, the kind of thing that is patronage based is things like buy me a coffee, which are um, PayPal like um, add-ons that you could put on web pages at the end of blog posts and things like this, where people can click and put in, like as one would into a piggy bank or into an artist's hat. Let's say the artist is like a musician performing at a subway station. It's that kind of model. And Patreon used to be like that. It no longer is. And it's not how I use Patreon. I use Patreon as a platform to hone a very specific kind of creative work. And what that is now is the work that is specifically um, focused on my fantasy and sci-fi storytelling. It used to be a mishmash of everything. I used to offer instruction for writers. There used to be a space inside Discord for writers specifically. I used to do writer based content. It also used to host things related to my In a Certain Kingdom podcast and my Russian retellings. In fact, for a while there, I was trying to use Patreon as a platform for a relaunch of the In a Certain Land podcast hosted inside Patreon as a Patreon only offering. That did not work. The technology of that completely failed me, as I've talked about in other places. It's not really necessary to hash that out unless you all want me to, and you ask me in the questions. I'd be happy to rehash that for those who are here today. But that's not going to be part of what the Patreon is anymore. The Patreon is specifically focused on my work as a storyteller in the fantasy and sci-fi genres. And part of that is talking about stories, which is what Fantasy for Our Time podcast is, and which is what the Craftsman's Workshop podcast partially is. But the really great and really exciting addition to the Patreon community that's coming, starting next month, is the following. Recently, I signed up and was accepted into a mentorship, a short form fiction mentorship with Kathryn Rusch, who was a longtime mentor of mine. She and her husband, Dean Wesley Smith, were the go to ghostwriters for all the novelizations of popular media fiction, Star Trek, um, Star Wars, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, in the 90s. They were the go to writers. And their own work, although perhaps not as known as some of the George Martins of the world and stuff like this, they actually know George Martin personally. They're good friends with him. And in terms of their short fiction, and in terms of their bona fides within the author community, they are considered to be absolutely top of the line. Chris Rusch herself is a World Fantasy Award winner, and she was considered to be one of the best sci-fi and fantasy editors out there. She edited the science fiction and fantasy magazine for a very long time. That is the premier magazine for short form fiction in our favorite genres. She's offering a 6-month mentorship for a small group of writers who are going to write short fiction for her like crazy. 2 prompts a month. That means 2 short stories a month. And those of you who have been at my $10 tier for a while have been waiting for short fiction for me and have received over these past 2 or 3 years, I think 4 short stories when I promised they would be monthly. Yes, if you want to leave, I understand. I have not kept up on that promise at all, and I'm very sorry. I wish I had a better hold over reality so that I could force myself to write when it was physically impossible. But this is unfortunately how it is. Now, however, I have not left myself an out. This mentorship is paid, even though there was a selection process for it. So if I miss a prompt, if I don't write a story, that's on me, and that's wasted money and wasted opportunity to work with one of the best editors who actually buy fiction for selling markets out there. And yes, she continues to buy fiction for magazines uh, that sell short form fiction in a variety of genres. This is going to be very experimental. She's going to be pushing me on the genres that I know how to write in. She's going to be encouraging me to write in genres I have no idea how to write in. It's going to be very challenging, and it's going to be fascinating. And I am going to offer you, my Patreon subscribers, my patrons, access to those short stories after they are vetted or checked by my mentor. No one else is going to see these stories until they are sold and bought by magazines. And at that point, I have little control about when they appear and how you're going to see them. So if you want to see my engagement with one of the best editors of sci-fi and fantasy out there and see how that what that does to my creativity and what kinds of stories come out of that, come and join us, because this is perhaps the most exciting thing that has happened to me in my writer career in a very, very long time. And I'm super stoked about this. I cannot wait to get started. This means that my offerings inside the community have been simplified and have been changed in terms of the tier prices. The coaches that I was talking to that suggested that I was giving too much away at too low a price because of the realities of the subscription model nowadays basically said you need to get rid of the $2 tier. And I know that some of you cannot afford more than $2 a month. And I'm sorry to see you go. I really, really am. And I'm super, super grateful for those of you who were with me for such a long time, offering whatever you could at whatever price point you could. Unfortunately, this is no longer something that I am able to offer. I need to level up. And the way I need to get more serious about this is part of now an active part of my writer business. It's not simply a place for occasional and sporadic patronage. This is a working um, craftsman's workshop. So I'm increasing all the tiers up to a corresponding level. Everybody who was at the $2 level is automatically moved to the $5 level. Everybody who was at the $5 level is moved automatically to the 10. Everybody who was at the 10 is moved automatically to the 20. Everybody who's at the 20 is moved automatically to a new $30 tier. Uh, and that's it. Those are the only offerings inside this community. Now, for the next 31 days, your pricing structure does not change. You have an opportunity to try out the new offerings that I'm giving you at the higher price point for 30 days. And you are still locked in at your old price for 31 days. All right. Some of you have run away already, screaming. There was one particular person who left a message uh, in their survey that you have an option to let me know why you left, and that person was not happy with the price change. And again, I totally understand. I'm not making light of people's financial issues. I know that things are hard. I really, really understand. Um, that being said, there's still plenty of time for you to try out the different tiers. So if you were at the $5 tier before and you've been moved to the 10, please check out, and I'm going to tell you right now, but it is written down inside the Patreon community exactly what the tiers are so that you know what you're getting. Now, here's the official breakdown of the new tiers according to their price point. Ready? All right. You can bookmark this, Derek. This is an important point. In fact, we'll probably have to take this section out and clip it for people to keep referring to, at least for the near future. The lowest tier inside the Kotarverse, the Patreon community belonging to yours truly, Nicholas Kotar, is the $5 tier. At this tier, you get access to these kinds of live streams uh, and occasional gifts that I offer you, and all other public posts. They're not public. Some of them will be public. Most of them are behind a paywall. These are just occasional posts about what's going on and about the offerings inside the community. Everybody gets these. The live streams are for everyone. The Discord community is for everyone at the $5 level and above. But that's it. I'm taking away free ebook downloads and free audiobook downloads. Why? Because you didn't want them. That you told me this in your surveys. There were very few people that found free ebook and audiobook downloads as an important part of the Patreon membership. And that doesn't surprise me, because the kinds of people that you all are and the kinds of people that I attract are people who are like me, I think. These are people who like beautiful, physical objects, who like to have a book in their hand that is beautifully created, beautifully carved, beautifully made, that you can look at, that you can smell, you can appreciate the artistry of it. That's what I want to do more of. Not quick to churn out um, ebooks and AI created audiobooks. Although that's a different conversation we might have at a different time. At the $10 level, at the $10 tier, what happens is you have all access to live streams and the Discord channel, and you also have you receive access to the once a month Zoom in-person chats. So anybody at the $5 level will not get the link for the in-person Zoom get-togethers at the end of the month. Those are $10 and above. I'm going to stop here for a second. Michael is very helpfully offering me some commentary here in the chat. Michael, you're saying, I'm liking the focus and direction. Technical question for the end. For those of us who support it annually, I'm guessing the tier changes won't apply until renewal. Is that correct? Yes, your tier changes will not apply. And in fact, if your tier change happens to coincide with the period between now and 31 days from now, you're locked in to the old annual price. So if some of you are very lucky and you signed up between October 21st and November 22nd or 23rd, whatever 31 days is, you're going to come back on the old annual price. So, and I think that means that if actually don't quote me on that, I might be wrong, but that's as far as I know. And P.S. the $30 tiers are still showing as available. Oh, the greater than $30, yes. Okay, so I'm not bringing any attention to the $100 and $250 tiers. They are there because I am still doing limited in-person coaching for writers. I don't want to take them off Patreon because I don't want to lose contact with them, including all of their extensive email history that's inside the Patreon ecosystem. But I've made it so that no new people can sign up. I've taken away all the extra sign up slots, so it looks like it's full. I've left the 250, the kind of crazy, insane people level, because every once in a while there's a person who wants to pay for access at an extremely high level. I had this happen to me one time, and this was the person who signed up for an annual membership at the 250 level in advance. And that was like a single day's worth of almost $3,000. And I was like, whoa, sometimes that happens. So I'm not going to remove it. I'm just not putting any attention to it whatsoever. So as far as I'm concerned, those things don't exist. If someone happens to notice that they exist, more power to you. Go ahead. But I'm not bringing any attention to it. And most people don't have enough staying power to actually click beyond the $10, $20 tier anyway. And you have to click to be able to see beyond the $20 tier. So I'm counting on the fact that most people will simply not see that those tiers exist. I think eventually I will unpublish them, but that's going to be after a little bit of time has passed and after I've gotten into the rhythm with this new direction. Oh, they still list the book club. Thank you, Michael. That's a good point. I will fix that. That is not a technical glitch. That is simply a lack of editing abilities from crazy creative who doesn't like to edit. So I will fix that. Thank you very much, Michael. Okay, well that's what's happening with the Patreon in starting now, but especially with the focus with a focused new approach to the offerings inside this channel from November 2024 onwards. December is going to be much less intense for obvious reasons. I might have one live stream perhaps, but really this is all about refocusing everything for 2025. Yes, Michael, that was pretty amazing thing to happen indeed. There are other things that are going on that are somewhat relevant to you people who are supporting me here in Patreon. And you might just want to know about them. They are not, some of these are not directly related to the offerings you will receive. Some of them are. I should mention that there's a new tier, the $30 tier. Oh, I didn't finish. I'm sorry. I didn't finish talking about the differences between the new and old tiers. So the $20 tier is the tier at which you receive the short fiction that I was just talking about at length. So the $10 tier, the unique offering at that tier is Zoom get-togethers. So anybody at 10 and above gets those. For the $20 tier, the unique gift, the reward that you receive at that tier is the short fiction that I'm writing under the mentorship and tutelage of Kristine, Kathryn, Rusch. And the $30 tier is a new tier where whoever signs up at that tier will receive a signed paperback or hardcover book of every new book that I publish, depending on what format it is and depending on what you want. For example, if I publish a new book in several formats at once, I will give you an option and you will tell me what you prefer. I will sign it and you will receive a book on your doorstep a few weeks after it comes out. So that's the new tier. It's kind of a physical merch tier. At this point, the merch will only be my books, but I think with time and with the enhancement of this um, Patreon in terms of both uh, new people and new energy and new enthusiasm from both me and from the people inside it. I couldn't do without any of you, of course. I hope to be able to offer some things um, that are ancillary to my books that have direct relevance to them. Things like the throw blanket that I designed for the Son of the Deathless Kickstarter, handcrafted mugs, which I'm getting into soon. They're really beautiful, and I use them myself for my own creativity. And I want to offer them to some of you as special presents, perhaps even in time for Christmas. And part of that is that I am about to um, get very seriously into the process of finalizing the design for the hardcover versions, special edition hardcover versions of the Raven Sun series. This will be the authorized version of the novel. It will include short fiction that was published inside the Patreon during this past year, and it will also include new material that has never been published before. It will have in it the sometimes forgotten novella, The Rusted Blade, and the covers are designed by Ewan Craig, who did the beautiful, beautiful wood carved covers for the In a Certain Kingdom Kickstarter that I am just about finishing fulfilling this week, if all goes well. So those are happening. Those will definitely be going out to the $30 tier members. In a Certain Land, the podcast is coming back. I know I've been saying that a lot, but what I've done is I've actually partnered with a podcast producer slash distributor. I can't say who it is yet. I will say it very soon as I get the official okay. This is an impressive organization that knows about storytelling very well and has just the right kind of marketing push to be able to make this come out in a way that will allow me simply to focus on translating and telling the stories, which is really what I'm good at. And all that production and marketing stuff for the stories, I'm terrible at. Ask me about marketing of books in another setting when we're talking to authors inside the Story Hearth community, fine. But we're not doing that here anymore. By the way, this is one thing I didn't mention, and that is all author related activity inside Patreon is no longer happening. I'm taking down the Discord channel for author activities, and I'm encouraging everybody to move over to my author community, which is known as the Story Hearth. It is the video on YouTube that you are probably watching, if you're not watching live, will have the link to join. Nick, good to see you. How are you? So In a Certain Land is happening. Not only that, but it's time to get back into the world of Russian fairy tales and folklore, something that is very close to my heart, but I've had to avoid for a long time simply because of lack of time. And I'm starting a new Substack that is my own personal Substack and will include old and new material, both blog and audio and translation that is related to my stories, related to the fairy tales, and related to the novels insofar as they are inspired by those stories. And I have a wonderful assistant that I'm hiring from Canada who's helping me set up this Substack that's going to be going live in early 2025. It's also going to be a place where my regular reader newsletter is going to be published. I will still send it out to your inboxes for all of you who are signed up that way, so don't worry. But it will also appear inside this new Substack, which tentatively will be called Firebirds in Cow Country. And those of you who know me will recognize all of the references and Easter eggs in there. And if you don't know what's going on, don't worry, you will. Finally, I just wanted to recommit to you all that writing, the heart of what I do, which has been so sadly lacking in the past 3 years, is something that I'm not just talking about recommitting to. I have been writing regularly for the past 5 months. I can't talk to you about what I've been writing because it is a work for hire for a video game company. It's a script slash novelization of a story that is attached to a brand new um, video game that will be coming out in a few years, and it is really challenging me in terms of style, in terms of genre, in terms of consistency, and in terms of regularity of sitting in front of the computer and just writing even when you don't feel like it. And let me tell you, it is the most beautiful thing in the world to get back after years into a sense that once again the story is flowing. And sometimes, there are little block ups that happened, and goodness knows it will be difficult to maintain a regularity of pace, because that's the nature of the creative life. We are not all James Patterson. But the fact that after a very long hiatus, I was able to come back and, in a genre I'd never written before, find a voice, find a storytelling style in a way that brings me much, much joy in spite of the darkness of the story that I'm writing, is something that I dare say will be very instrumental in the coming years in terms of new work being produced. Some of the things I will be writing for Chris Rusch will be novella length, and the novella length books are probably going to be published directly by me, which means it's possible that next year you will see several new novellas from me. In addition to that, we have the Cantos of Arcadia coming up in early 2025, and I've promised my eldest son that I'm going back into the world of the Son of the Deathless, and I'm going to write that new late Vasilia fantasy series, more geared towards young adult age readers, but in the style of the old masters of the children's fantasy, people like Lloyd Alexander, the kinds of stories that everybody loves, whether they are 7 or 77. And that's a significant number, by the way, because my father yesterday turned 77. And yes, this coming year is very much dedicated to him. He is a great inspiration to me, a true father, and I love him very much. And just wanted to share with you all that his presence and his help has been very instrumental in helping make all of this possibility. So 2025 is dedicated to him. Let it be known to the 77-year-old Father Serge Kotar. Well, that's all I have for you for today. This is the latest in a series of Craftsman's Workshop videos. You can see the others inside your Patreon feed. They're always there. They're not going to go away anywhere. And this will go out as a regular YouTube video soon, probably next month. And you can start seeing the changes inside the community fairly soon. The new short stories will be coming up already, probably in mid-November. And new live streams are going to be coming fairly soon as well. I'm very excited about delving into some unusual and perhaps unexpected fiction, and both written and visual and audio media. And I hope you all join me for that as we take a bold step on a new quest to find those stories that are worth sacrificing everything for, and perhaps even dying for, as Petso so eloquently stated. Thank you all for coming, for listening to me blab for a while. It's a real honor for me to be able to create for you all. It's a really humbling experience to publish these books and to do these live streams and to see you all respond to them and have sometimes really transformational experiences, not through my words, but simply through the beauty of interacting together with one another in the search for the good, the true, and the beautiful. These are the things that we all want so much from our life, especially as things are going to get really crazy over the next few weeks. So hang on in there, dear friends, and I'll be here to distract you from the madness of the world so that we can all go deeper into a certain kingdom and a certain land. It's been great talking to you all. I will see you all soon.